Hi, okay, welcome back to this series of tutorials looking at primary um, color correction and grading. So, just in case I don't think I've mentioned it, but the primary, um, what we mean when we say primary grade is we mean a grade or a correction that basically affects the entire image. So you'll notice we've been using sort of the sliders around here. Haven't really got around to using the wheels yet, but you'll see that the tool itself does state primaries wheels. Okay, and the reason they're primaries is because a primary grade, like I said, affects, well, the entire image. So even though the lift, gamma, and the gain affect different portions of the image, so the gain affects the brightest parts, the gamma affects the mids, and the lift affects the shadow area. In truth, they affect the whole image anyway. You pull any one of these far enough, so the gain, like I said, should really only be affecting um, the sky primarily. But if I keep pulling it or pull it far enough, at some point everything will become red or orange. Okay, so just undo that for a second. So the point is that these aren't really affecting just a single portion of the image. They are pulling the whole image. Just that the gain is pulling from the top, but it's still having an effect on the rest of the image too. So that's why this is called primary work, because the tools we're using are affecting the whole image. So we've kind of already gone through and just done some tonal range adjustments, and now we've got this image where it's it's got a blue color cast, and we need to remove that. Now we're lucky because we've got a shot before it, which we can kind of look at as a way to sort of check, what the values should actually be. But we're going to try to do this manually as well. So we're going to use the wheels again in order to be able to fix this. Now you'll see there are some other tools down here. So there is, for example, little white balance dropper, which if we click on that eyedropper, we should be able to select something that should be white, and it will sort of make an adjustment uh, based on that. And it's not done too bad a job, and we could still go in and tweak it, but I'm going to undo that as well. So like I said, let's have a look at doing this ourselves. So we're going to do two things actually. We're going to not only correct the color, but we want to kind of make sure they match up in regards to luminance and things like that as well. Now, what I would say is for that, you can see that they do have a very similar sort of arch that goes up, and then this kind of M shape in the middle, which I imagine might be perhaps these parts of the road, perhaps the bright dark bits. Um, and if we kind of look back, you can see the first one is a lot lower than this one. So I might just go back and just pull this down a bit anyway. So at least that's closer. Right, now we can carry on, we can make color adjustments here, but I would suggest adding it to a new node. So you can see this is a node-based system. So every clip we've worked on, we didn't really have a look up here, but there are little nodes sitting there. So the correction that we've created so far exists within this thing. This here is your input signal, that is your output, what we see, and then you can add nodes as you go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this node, I'm going to go add node, and we're just going to add a serial node. Okay, if you let me just I think you have to right click and change label. I was trying to remind myself how to rename it, but if I want to, I could just call that tonal, so I know that that was a tonal range. And then on here I'm going to just go change label, and we'll call this I guess color cast, perhaps. Okay, or possibly even um, color cast fix. Okay, so now any changes I make at least will be color wise will be contained within this node. So if I find that it doesn't work, I can delete that. So the best thing to do really is to start looking at what's going on, and what is different between the two, and then sort of slowly fixing those. So you can see here, for example, the cloud is a lot more central, which kind of makes sense. There's not really much color in there. I mean, we might get some bits where we move along and we can see um, some color. There seems to be a line towards the red. I think it's just kind of the slight warm elements to that picture. Sort of, well, it's a bit of a reddish brown there and so on. And then I guess you've got the red lights and things like that as well. Actually, it's interesting overall. This now appears a little bit dark, but we'll look at how we fix that in a sec. So yeah, coming onto here, this is way too blue. So we know that the more the color pops out, the stronger the saturation. So I might just start with the saturation down here. So let's, now I can either click and drag left and right to adjust the numbers, or I can click in there and type in a value myself. Let's try something like 35. So I'm just reducing that down. You can see the blue color cast obviously still exists, but it's not as strong. So I brought that down a little bit. Also, what I'm going to do is actually, yeah, I'm gonna pull that saturation down a bit more, because if I look at the notice on here, on the waveform, the values are kind of coming together a bit more. Obviously, take it down too far and I'll turn it into a black and white image, which isn't what I want. So I have to be careful about not doing that. But I think I'll pull it back a little bit more. Now, the other thing as well is obviously it still has too much blue. And where are those blues? Up here, so kind of in the highlights, I'd say. Now we could use the offset, which would affect everything, or we could try it with the gain. I'm going to try a bit of both. So offset will affect the blue everywhere, and so I'm going to move this dot away from the blues because I want to reduce the blues in the image. Okay, and I'm going to try just pulling it a bit too far to start with. If you have a look at the waveform, you'll see why. Okay, in fact, let me just undo that so we're kind of back to where we are. Right, if I pull it too far, notice what happens to these blue values. You're going to see they start to drop and join in with the other bits. Yeah, you can see it's kind of coming together a bit. But again, I have to be careful about how much I actually do. So I'm going to do it now based on looking at this image, and I'm going to do a little bit in the highlights too. Okay, so kind of getting that sort of M shape there. And if I go back to here, I can kind of see how the two look. And so at that point, I can see that the second one is perhaps just a little bit too high. So I'm going to pull that down just a bit. Basically try to get it to sit in around the same place. And you can see it's starting to work. The highlights look a little bit too red, and I think that's because of perhaps the offset. Let's see if we can just pull those back a bit. Okay, so I kind of have to make some tweaks, but it's starting to get there. The highlights are brighter as well. Notice, look at the lines. Look how much brighter they get when we jump from one shot to the other. Yeah, my highlights are a lot higher. So again, I might just need to bring just the highlights down slightly. Okay, and so we it's still too bright, but I can work on that. So you can see we're just doing it manually, but we're starting to get to a point where it's starting to match up. It's not looking too bad. And if we ever decide actually no, that was a mistake, we can just get rid of this, or we can disable it. We can select it and press Control D, and it will turn that off. So now the original signal is still having the tonal range, but none of the color correction. And we could add a new one if we wanted to, and just keep that there in case. So give that a go as well and see if you can match those clips up.